Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to Cub Chat Live. Shout out Pack 84. Hello, Omid. Thanks for tuning in. And hello, Jeremy. Everybody, welcome to today's show. You might be thinking, is that Angelique, the communications chair for Scouts BSA? Did I tune into Troop Talk Live? No, this is Cub Chat Live. Troop Talk Live. Mark your calendar. We'll be live next Wednesday. We've got a great show. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But today we are so lucky to have Angelique for a two-parter Cub Chat Live. This first part, we're talking a lot to leaders, although parents, new Cub Scout families, you guys stay tuned. But we're talking to leaders today. And what are we talking about, Angelique?
Well, specifically, we're talking to Webelos den leaders, and we're talking about the transition from Webelos to Scouts BSA troop, which is right in my wheelhouse.
Very cool. So Doyle also, you're going to probably have some comments along with today's show. He's from Pack 505, and his son and his Webelos den just crossed over, but they're looking forward to pointers for next year. Doyle, you're going to hear, hopefully you'll be able to tune into the Troop Talk Lives on Wednesdays as well. Now you've got this Scouts BSA son, and we would love your pointers today. Please, everybody, keep the comments coming. We'd love to read your ideas and your pointers for making this transition a beautiful one. Angelique, I didn't even say thank you for being on with us today.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here. I love this opportunity to talk to everybody.
Okay, let's get into it. I would love, if you guys have questions at home, chime in. But something that I'm a little curious about, can you kind of demystify, like, we hear of crossover, we hear of, Webelos transitioning, we hear of Arrow of Light. Like, what is it all? Can you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Webelos are the scouts that are nearing the end of their Cub Scout journey, and they the last 6 months is Arrow of Light. And at that point, they are learning all about what it is to be part of a Scouts BSA troop. So all of their adventures, many of them are geared towards some of the things that they're going to start doing in Scouts BSA. And as den leader, we are responsible, and I was a den leader for Webelos Scouts and Arrow of Light Scouts. So as a den leader, we are in charge of helping them make that transition so it's smooth and enjoyable for both the Scouts and the families.
Very cool. So what does some of that like education include? What do Scouts need to learn, in that Arrow of Light time period?
So there is one adventure in particular, the Scouting Adventure, and it's designed specifically to help Cubs learn some of the methods and practices and parts of a Scouts BSA troop. So they are doing a little bit of learning some things that are, a little bit of book learning, but hopefully a lot of it is going to be experiential, where they're going out to visit a troop. They're going out on a camp out or an outdoor activity with their troop. And they're organizing themselves into patrols, which is a lot different than a Cub Scout den.
Yeah, that's a great point. And sometimes the terminology gets confusing because I feel like we say troop so much when we talk about Scouts BSA, and sometimes I think people are thinking like, okay, that's the equivalent of a den, but den and a patrol are really more similar. Is that right?
Yeah, so it can be challenging, especially if you're new to the program, to know what all these different terms are. So the best way to think about it, I think, is that dens make up packs, which we're all familiar with, but in the troop, patrols make up the troop. So unlike, however, Cubs, in the patrol, in a Scouts BSA troop and patrol, the youth are the leaders. So instead of having a den leader and a Cub master, you do have a Scout master, but their Scout master isn't actually in charge of the troop. The youth are. So you have patrol leaders and a senior patrol leader. So learning about that a little bit as a Webelo or an Arrow of Light, that's kind of what the whole point of that adventure is, to help teach them some of those differences between it.
Okay, that's put very well. And that distinction kind of sticks out in my head when we're talking about the difference between Cub Scouts and Scouts BSA at the very base level.
Yeah.
Cub Scouts is leader-led, parent-led, and Scouts BSA, the leaders really are the youth. And that's an important transition for the youth, of course, obviously, but it's definitely a big transition for the parents who are involved as leaders as well. It's kind of a shift in your mind.
Yeah, very much so. And honestly, that can cause a lot of conflict if you're not familiar with that idea, because parents are watching their youth, their child move to a troop, and then they feel like, why isn't this organized better? Why didn't they give me this, this, and this right away? And you have to understand that little bit of, at this point, we're teaching your child how to be a leader, and that takes some practice, and that takes a little getting used to.
So maybe parents can kind of think of that arrow of light period as a bit of a transition for them as well. They're educating on kind of what that transition is going to look like.
Absolutely.
And I guess we're kind of getting into the meat of next week. Sorry, I just realized we're talking about parents next week, but I just got off topic.
Yeah, but we're talking about den leaders today.
Yes.
And so den leaders play a huge part in this transition. And really the den leader is the person who can make sure that parents are understanding and scouts are understanding what those changes are going to be from program to program. So I absolutely would love to talk today about some of those ways that a den leader can do that.
Very good. And we are getting a lot of comments. People are wanting to talk about visiting troops with your Webelos scouts and all this jazz. Guys, we'll get to those comments in just a second. They're going to come in important place in just a minute. Quick shout out to Troop 601 in Farmingdale. We've got some great questions as well to get to. A lot about troop visiting, which, spoiler, we're going to get there in just a second. Heather is a first-year Webelos Den leader here. She's excited to learn about how to help next year. Your timing is perfect, Heather.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in. Okay, I want to ask you den chiefs. So, okay, my mind goes, okay, we're talking about like this transitional period. We're talking about Cub Scouts kind of getting in the groove of what Scouts BSA is like. How can den chiefs play in?
Sure. So for anyone who's not familiar, a den chief is a youth from a Scouts BSA troop that comes to assist leading the den. So they work ideally directly with the den leader, the adult, and making sure that there's too deep leadership, of course, as always. But working with the den leader to help lead the youth, the Cub Scouts, in their den. So a den chief from a troop is particularly useful for the Webelos and Arrow of Light Scouts, because they are going to transition from the adults leading them to the youth leading them in a troop. So having that youth come and start to help run the den meetings really sets the stage for, hey, look, the grown-ups aren't in charge anymore. It's this really cool teenager who's here to help lead us. And that helps a lot, I think, with the transition if you're able to do it.
Probably also helps the leader as well to kind of see like that passing of the torch a little bit. Like, I'm going to let the youth play a more active role in leading this.
Yes, absolutely. It can be hard transition. I remember I have 2 kids, and that transition, it was a little abrupt the first time we went through it. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not helping anymore with this.
I can only imagine, because also being involved in older youth programs, venturing, whatever, that's where I have volunteered in the past. And you can see there are certainly parents who have not changed their approach since Cub Scouts. I mean, let's just be honest. They still think it's Cub Scouts. And really, that is not the point as we get into like our older units.
Yeah, one of the purposes of scouting and the Scouts BSA level is to teach all youth how to be good leaders. So we have to set them up to succeed, and part of that is knowing when and how to step back so that those kids can do that.
Yes, it's really the biggest gift we can give to our scouts. That's where leadership development certainly is taking place, when we are allowing them to fail safely and setting them up to succeed. I love that. That's a whole nother topic.
That's a new topic. Yeah, we'll talk about that on Troop Talk Live.
I can't wait. Okay, Rob has a good clarification. Dens are run by a den leader who's an adult. Patrols are run by a patrol leader who is a youth. That kind of gets us off onto our next topic. How does that work? When do you start to like make that transition and get a patrol leader in place?
So you actually do that in your last 18 months of Cub Scouts. That is when you are forming, you're having your Cubs form their patrol. So instead of the den, they take on this persona of a patrol. They elect a patrol leader, which is a youth in the den. And they are making up their yell and their flag, and they're picking their emblem. So that's the first time they come up with a patrol name. And that's a lot of fun, by the way, to have 10 and 11-year-olds making the patrol name. It's my favorite. But that's when they're forming that patrol spirit. And that patrol leader, you as the den leader, are going to start guiding this patrol leader to help make decisions about what your den is going to do and how your den is going to run. And that's how you can really set them up to succeed, is when you are scaffolding and teaching that den leader and those kids in the den how to behave like a patrol.
Okay, so full disclosure, I've worked at the Boy Scouts of America for a while, and I would be lying if I said I didn't know that the patrol leader was elected while the Scouts were still in Webelos.
Yeah.
But I only knew by a few minutes before this show because of reading your notes.
Yeah, so that means
that blows my mind. It's so cool.
Yeah, blow a lot of people's mind that maybe aren't familiar with it, but they're forming a patrol and they're acting like a patrol as a Webelo and Arrow of Light Scout. So that is not something we want to gloss over in this last year of 18 months of Cub Scouting. This is what's going to help them be comfortable when they move to a troop. And so, we're going to talk here in a moment about visiting troops and camping with troops, but they form that patrol first so that then they can take that patrol to go do things with troops.
Okay, I am so excited to hear this. I love the way, scouting is set up so brilliantly. It's like almost you have like this test period where we said it a second ago, setting the Scouts up to succeed. That's exactly what we're doing, where they had more than a year potentially of getting to practice what it's like to be in a patrol while still having the support Cub Scouts have.
Yeah.
And still being around their Cub Scout friends.
And even all of the, many of the requirements for that scouting adventure mimic the requirements for Scout rank, which is the first rank that you earn in a Scouts BSA troop. And that's for a reason. That's because we're setting them up for their very first rank experience to be a huge shining success because they've already practiced it. So they know the material, they've practiced it. They can practice the whole rank advancement for the very first time, and hopefully it's not a stressful situation for them because they've done it already.
Right. That makes so much sense. Okay, our audience is tracking with us. Rob has a really great comment. Even before your scout crosses, be sure you know what they're getting into by visiting with troops in the area. We had 18 scouts join our troop, and about half had no contact with the troop whatsoever before joining. So some of those might have been like brand new scouts to the, Boy Scouts of America period. So maybe they didn't transition from Cub Scouts. Maybe they did. And then Pack 304 has a great 307 has a great question. What are some questions and things to look for when visiting troops? Which kind of gets us to our next point. Another thing that some folks may not know, but there's actually a troop meeting visit requirement, right?
Yeah, there is. So there are a few things as a den leader, because remember, we're going to talk about from the den leader's perspective. And next week, we're going to talk from the parent's perspective. And that's where we'll talk about all these good questions to ask about finding the right fit as a troop. But today we're talking about den leader. So as a den leader, first thing, you want to make sure that you understand how a troop functions, because how are you going to teach it to your scouts if you don't know yourself? So before we even go to that troop visit, there is a great resource page, and it's right there on screen. He's so on top of things. But there's a troop resource landing page, and that's where you can start learning about how a troop functions. If you're new to scouting, or even if you were in scouting when you were a youth, it's good to go look because things change and things are different. So go ahead and make sure you understand how a troop is supposed to function. After that, if you still have questions, you can contact Unit Commissioner, and they'll be able to help point you to some more resources. But ideally, when you're going to visit a troop with your den that is now a patrol, ideally you should try and take your whole den as a group because they are a patrol. So you want to take them to the troop meeting, and you want to take them to as many troops as there are in your area. You want to try and visit all of them. You really only have to visit one as the minimum requirement, but the more troops that you visit, it's all about finding the right fit for the scout. You don't have to go to any particular troop just because everyone has done it that way in the past, or because that's the closest. You can go to any troop that meets your needs, your family's needs best. So it's really important to visit lots of troops. So as a den leader, you take your whole patrol and you can function as a little patrol or a big patrol in that troop for a meeting, and take part in their activities where appropriate. So in a troop meeting, they will have different parts some parts of the meeting will be activities, some will be learning new things, some will be planning for upcoming campouts. So just remember, as a little resource, there is a age-appropriate guide to scouting. So if you're not sure if your scouts are allowed to participate in that activity that the troop is doing, and he's dropping it right there, that will help you know whether or not your Webelos can participate in that activity or not. But yeah, you go to the meeting, you experience what it's like to be in a troop, and then it's not so scary for the scouts. They've done it lots of times, hopefully, before they're crossing over to a troop, and they found the right troop that fits for them.
I like that. Shout out to Behind the Scenes Brian for putting those links on screen for us. And he's also dropping them in the comments wherever you are viewing this episode right now. You can click into those or save them for later. Or if you're watching the show and it's not live, look in the comments. Those links are there. We have some great comments coming in. Shout out to Jeremy's Troop 101. They're in Story City, Iowa. Pack 100 and Troop 100 Boy and Girls in Bossier City. Hey, guys. And then, hello, Webelos AOL Den Leader from Pack 321. Yay, we're so glad you're watching. Christine says that they cross their AOLs over during their blue and gold at the end of February after they come back from Christmas break. Our AOLs, that's Arrow of Lights, and their den chief move to more meetings led by them instead of their den leader. That's perfect. It sounds like it's like kind of like that movement towards,
Yeah,
really transition.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to help them transition, and they're going to meetings and they're starting to lead. And that's how you get that smooth transition where it's not so scary or abrupt for the families or for the scout.
Now, Pack 307 has a question that kind of leads into next week, but it could, but it's good for a leader to know this too. Do miles high to nights camps, conservation hours from Cub Scouts transfer over to the troop?
No, those were done during Cub Scout. So those count for Cub Scout. Once they cross over and they officially are on your roster, that's when it starts counting for the Scouts BSA.
Love that clarification. Okay, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, where there still is a full program to finish out with Cub Scouts, just because you're kind of in that transition period.
Right.
You're necessarily in Scouts BSA.
Yeah, you have to have that application to transfer, and we'll talk about it next week, but there's actually an application that goes in and they have to be transferred from unit to unit. Once that application goes through, that's the actual date that they were transferred into the troop.
Yes. Okay. Valerie says, I took my pack around because each troop is different. Scouts fit like puzzle pieces and they need to find the right fit. All 13 transferred and remained in their troops for at least a year. Some became Eagles. Yay, Valerie. That's exactly. It might seem like a little more work, but really it isn't necessarily, because these are other meetings that you get to go to. Some other leaders potentially doing a lot of the planning for this, probably a youth. And I feel like it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think, this can be your den meeting to go to a troop meeting, because that is what you are working on as an Arrow of Light in your last 6 months. You are working on transitioning to a Scouts BSA troop. So it's perfectly okay for your den meeting that week to be, let's go to a troop and practice the skills that we're learning.
Sabrina has I want to give her a gold medal for question of the day. We have some other points to get through, but I really want to give you Sabrina's question. She says their AOL youth are shy and reluctant to lead. Any tips to burst confidence? Hello to Pack 112, by the way.
Yeah, I love this question. So kids, they don't usually know how to naturally lead. They're so used to, we tell them what to do and when and where and how. And so when you tell them, okay, you do it, they don't have practice doing that yet. So the method that I like to employ most is ask leading questions. So instead of telling your scout, your cub, instead of telling them what to do and how to do it, you can say, let's give an example. They're working on a project and you can ask them, what do you think is the next step? and ask them, let's tell the group, what do you think the next step is? And it doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to put them in front of everybody. It can be as simple as, you guys are working on making foil packet dinners at a camp out. Okay, what do you think the next step is going to be? And let them answer. And that's a great way to get them comfortable with speaking up and not feeling like they're in the spotlight, but speaking up and starting to lead a little bit. And those leading questions, as they get used to that, they're going to learn, oh, Mrs. Manette, she's going to ask me a question. So I'm just going to say, I think we should do this. And then they get the confidence, especially when they have the right answer to speak up.
Yeah, it's like kind of like seeing this longer period of time. It really is a transition. So the expectation isn't that they're just going to turn on their leadership skills and start being able to talk. It's that you're going to slowly start talking less, and they're slowly going to start talking more. And you're hoping that, as the year ends, you might see a totally different set of initiative in that.
Yeah, the biggest question you can ask to help them develop their leadership is, what do you think we should do next? And then be quiet and see what they say.
And to be honest, sometimes in the older units, I feel that we see that these kids haven't necessarily ever had that experience. Even in Scouts BSA, sometimes nobody has asked them, what do they think? Which is kind of wild to think. It should be totally youth led, but you are doing such a service to these Cub Scouts to get them thinking critically like this at that age.
Absolutely. Oh, so I do want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the camping and outdoor activity requirement, because that's a big one. And that's, I think, what a lot of Cubs look forward to is the requirement that they need to do a camp out or an outdoor activity with a troop. So from the den leader perspective, it's fabulous time for you to take Introduction to Outdoor Leadership Skills, which is for Scoutmasters and Assistant Scoutmasters. Because in that, they're going to talk about all of the different things, the activities that Scouts BSA Scouts are doing and how to keep them safe and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so it's a great time for you as a den leader to take that, even if you're not going to cross over with your Scout, just so that you're aware of what some of the things are that they're going to be doing when they cross over. But we talked about practicing as a patrol, and this camp out or outdoor activity is where the Scouts really get to put into practice the things that they've been learning in their den/patrol. So this is a chance where if they're invited to a camp out or an activity with a troop, where you can ask the troop, hey, can my den be part of the planning? And can they act as like a patrol and be part of the planning so that they get to see it in action? And that's a great, we talk about crossover, but that's a great crossover to the troop, to seeing firsthand how the kids are doing this compared to how they're doing it when it's adult led.
I like you have a point here too about talking to troop leadership, potentially before an outing and seeing how can I help prepare Cub Scouts for this. So because they might be activities that the Cub Scouts haven't done before. Yeah. There's going to be things that are new, like camping. Some of the kids you may have camped as a pack, but this might be the first time that they're camping with the troop, or it might be the first time they're camping at all, because that's a possibility. So you're going to really want to check and make sure that all of the families have the things they need to make the camp out really successful. So the Scouts that they need, they might not have tents. They might not have appropriate sleeping bags, especially this time of year, depending on where you live. The weather may not be the camping that they're used to. So we don't ever want a Scout to be left out because they don't have the equipment. So it's really good to ask and make sure. And then chances are really good that the troop that you're camping with will have extra equipment that they can lend out to make sure that the kids are having a good time. Right. And hopefully most of the time, these troops are hoping that some Scouts are going to be joining them from Webelos, making this crossover. So I hope that leaders don't feel like, oh, this is a burden, I'm putting too much on the troop, whatever, they're hoping, hopefully, that they're going to get some new Scouts.
Yeah, absolutely. Most troops will be thrilled that you want to be that active with their troop, because that means that the Scouts are really going to have a good time seeing how your troop functions and seeing how things run. And so they're going to say, absolutely, come be involved with what we're doing.
Very good tip. So I know we have one more point to get through. I want to read. Valerie says, as leader, she's echoing kind of what we've said. As leaders are moving up from Cub Scouts to troop, it's not easy to let them go from instructing them, let it go, to make that transition. But it needs to be. That's how it's got to happen. Exactly, Valerie. You get it.
It's not necessarily like not saying anything. And this is something I think on the troop level, we as volunteers sometimes don't quite understand. It's not that we're not talking, it's that we're being very selective about what we're saying. So it's less of a directive and more of a, what do you think needs to happen? Because even at the troop level, kids are still practicing leadership. So you ask those leading questions. You're asking, like, what do you think needs to happen? How could we make that better for next time? What could we do differently? And that helps those kids really get the idea that, oh, I can do this. I have good ideas and I'm a good leader. And that's what we want to see.
Fabulous. Okay, so next week, we've teased it a few times. We are going to be talking about how parents can handle the crossover transition, but I want to talk how can leaders help shape parent expectations for the
Sure.
transition?
So 100% as a den leader, you're going to impact how the parents are perceiving a troop, like the most, because they trust you with your kid. You've been doing things with their kids for the past year. So this is where, as a den leader, you can sit down with your parents of your cubs and say, hey, here are the differences between, just like what we've talked about, here are the differences between a cub pack and a troop. And here are some of the things that you're going to see that are different between cubs and a troop. And here's how we are going to manage that transition. And that will go a long way to help parents feel a lot more comfortable with the troop. Because especially if you're going from the one where it's adult-led in the Cubs to a troop, and the meetings are not what you would expect a meeting to be, that's because the kids are learning. And there's definitely room for mistakes, and there should be mistakes because they're learning. So as a parent, it can be frustrating. Oh, this troop meeting is a little wild, or, oh, they've spent so much time talking about the food that they're going to have on their camp out. They're learning. It's fantastic to watch once you understand what they're doing and why.
You've got the commenters fired up for sure. A lot of people are like, yes, troops love it when dens visit. We've even gotten 2 comments about Webelos Woods kind of events, which are kind of, so yeah, David says it's like a college fair where troops can show the Cubs what their troop is all about. And Rob echoes that too, but he's describing it more as like a camp out.
Yeah, so a lot of councils have an event where all the troops are invited and all of the Webelos dens are invited. I know my council does. And that is where they get to participate in a camporee style event, but they're paired with troops so they can see how troops are functioning. And sometimes that's great because you get a one-stop shop. You get to see a whole bunch of different troops acting all at the same time and go visit each one of them during the whole weekend. But definitely still go visit troops individually, because you want to see how each one runs their meeting, not just their camp out.
Yeah, I think it would be important to see the meeting. Okay, we've got time for one last question from Heather. It's specific, but I think it's a good one. She's wondering, is it too late to have my Webelos pick a patrol leader? They've got 4 scouts in their den, 3 are from last year, and 1 is new this year. Her son is the only scout who's been in the pack the longest. Any advice?
No, I mean, it's never too late. If you need to correct course at any time because you realize, oh, I could do this better, it's never too late to improve it. So if you haven't picked a den leader or a patrol leader in your pack, and you're like, oh, wait, I didn't quite understand this, but now I do, then we learn better, we do better. Go for it.
Yes. At the end of the day, you're a volunteer, and we can only ask that you're doing your best. So thanks for even asking and tuning in and, continuing your education. That's great.
Absolutely.
It has been so beyond fabulous to have you today. I think Aaron is supposed to host next week with you, but I'm going to try to convince him to let me because it's so fun to host with you. We'll just see how that turns out. We'll arm wrestle.
Well, thanks. I have so much fun being here. I love Cub Scout program, and I am super excited to make sure that transition from Cub to troop is just as much fun.
Yes. So if you liked today's topic, be sure to tune in next week. If you're a parent, you especially need to tune in next week. If you're a leader, tag some parents in the comments who might be enjoying a little bit more information on that Webelos transition. You can view today's episode and other past episodes of Cub Chat Live at scoutingmagazine.org/Cub Chat Live. And a special shout out for next week because we've got Troop Talk Live on Wednesday. It's going to be a good one. If you just love Angelique, you're just going to love next week too.
Yeah, so excited to see you all at the troop level.
Okay, well, we will see you in just a few days. I can't wait.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.